Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are opening up a file on a subject that I think most people feel like they already know. You close your eyes, you say the name, and boom, an image is right there.
Instantly.
The blue crown, the long, elegant neck, the symmetry. It is probably the most famous piece of limestone in human history.
The bust in Berlin.
It's iconic.
Exactly.
We are talking about Nefertiti. She is, arguably the most famous woman of the ancient world, maybe neck and neck with Cleopatra.
I'd say so, yeah.
But here's the thing, and this is why I was just glued to this stack of research you sent over. The image we have of the beautiful, serene face in the museum, it sort of acts like a mask.
That is the perfect way to put it. The beauty of the Thutmose bust is so overwhelming, so technically perfect, that it almost blinds us to the political reality of the woman herself.
Right.
It freezes her as a beauty icon, when in reality, she was a political titan.
A total titan. Because when you actually dig into the inscriptions, the archaeology, and all the weird forensic evidence we have now, you don't find a passive booty queen. Not at all.
You find a revolutionary. You find someone who was depicted smashing the skulls of her enemies.
And according to the latest scholarship in the stack, someone who likely ruled the entire Egyptian empire as a pharaoh in her own right.
That is the part we really need to unpack today. So the mission for this deep dive is to kind of shatter that limestone mask.
I like that.
We want to find the biological and political Nefertiti, the religious zealot, the mother, the ruler. We need to look at the evidence of her supposed disappearance, which, fooled historians for decades.
For a very long time, yeah.
And we need to get into the sort of CSI-style forensic twists regarding her mummy.
To do that, we have to set the scene properly. We are dropping into the 18th dynasty of ancient Egypt, specifically that window around 1353 to 1336 BC.
The Amarna period.
Yeah.
Which, for anyone who thinks ancient Egypt was just 3,000 years of stasis and people, walking like Egyptians, this was a time of absolute chaos.
It was probably the most turbulent 2 decades in Egyptian history until the collapse of the Bronze Age.
Oh, absolutely. On one hand, you have immense wealth. This is the absolute peak of the empire's gold reserves. But on the other, you have a total ideological reboot. We see a shift from traditional polytheism to the exclusive worship of the sun disk, the Aten.
And right at the center of the storm, driving the bus alongside the pharaoh, is Nefertiti.
She's not just a passenger, she's co-piloting.
So let's start at the very beginning, origins. Because even her name has been a source of confusion for a long time. Nefertiti translates to, the beautiful one has come.
NFRT-JY.TJ.
Yeah. And I know we usually just say Nefertiti because it's easier, but based on the linguistic reconstruction in the Nights, that wasn't really how her husband would have addressed her.
No, the vocalization would have been quite different. Based on the cuneiform correspondence from the diplomatic letters from other kings trying to write her name phonetically, it was likely pronounced something like Naftita.
Naftita. It sounds sharper, less flowery.
It does.
But that meaning the beautiful one has come, that caused a massive headache for historians for about a century, didn't it?
Oh, it did. It's that verb, has come. Early Egyptologists looked at that and thought, well, if she has come, she must have come from somewhere else.
Right, not from here.
Exactly. It launched this persistent theory that she was a foreign princess, possibly from the Mitanni Empire, which was in modern-day Syria.
The theory was that she was the princess Tutankhamun, right?
Correct. Tutankhamun was a Mitanni princess sent to marry Amenhotep III, who was Akhenaten's father. The theory went that when the old king died, she just married the son, changed her name to Nefertiti, and started a new life.
But the source material in our stack puts a pin in that balloon pretty quickly.
It really does. The timeline is the killer here. Tutankhamun was already married to Amenhotep III. There is absolutely no record anywhere of her changing her name.
And it wasn't common for foreign wives to get the top job, was it?
Not at all. In Egyptian royal tradition, foreign wives didn't usually become the great royal wife. They were, diplomatic assets. They were housed in the harem. Nefertiti's rise was just too meteoric, and her cultural integration too seamless for her to be a foreigner.
Okay, so if she wasn't a foreign princess, she had to be local. And the research points to a very specific, very powerful family circle.
The prevailing theory, and it is a very strong one, is that she was the daughter of a man named Ai.
Ai is a name that just keeps coming up in this era. He's like the little finger of the 18th dynasty. He's always there, lurking in the background of power.
That is a very apt comparison. Ai held the title God's father. Now, that title is a bit tricky, but it is often used for a man who is the father-in-law to the king.
So it implies a direct family link to the throne through marriage.
Precisely.
But here is where the family tree gets a little twisted. I had a wife named Tay, but in the inscriptions, Tay isn't called Nefertiti's mother.
Correct. Tay is given the title Nurse of the Great Royal Wife. She's never called Mut or Mother.
Nurse. That's a very, very specific distinction.
It is. It suggests that Tay was Nefertiti's stepmother. The implication is that A's first wife, Nefertiti's biological mother, died maybe in childbirth or shortly after. So Tay raised her.
Which actually strengthens the idea that Nefertiti was Egyptian nobility.
It does. She was raised in the absolute inner circle of the court, likely growing up alongside the future king, Akhenaten.
And we have another piece of evidence for this local origin, her sister.
Yes, a woman named Mut Benret. She appears in the tombs at Amarna, and the hieroglyphs explicitly identify her as the sister of the queen.
And Mut Benret was married to a general, right?
A general who would later become King Horemheb. So you see this really tight-knit group of Egyptian military and bureaucratic elite families all intermarrying. Nefertiti wasn't an outsider. She was the ultimate insider.
Before we move to her reign, I want to clear up one thing, because I feel like pop culture gets this wrong constantly. Nefertiti and King Tut.
The most common misconception in the book.
Everyone assumes she's his mother because they are the two most famous people from the era. But the DNA evidence from the mummies, it tells a very different story.
It does. We now have genetic profiles for the 18th dynasty royals, and we know that Nefertiti had 6 daughters with Akhenaten. We have their names, we have their pictures, but she never produced a male heir.
Okay. So who was Tut's mom?
Tutankhamun's biological mother is a woman found in tomb KV35, known to us as the Younger Lady. DNA proves the Younger Lady was a full sister of Akhenaten.
And Nefertiti wasn't Akhenaten's sister.
Exactly. Nefertiti was not royal by blood, she married in. So biologically, she cannot be Tutankhamun's mother. She was his stepmother.
And probably his mother-in-law too, right? Since Tut eventually married one of her daughters.
That's right. He married Ankhesenaten.
It's a very circular family tree.
The family wreath, as we like to call it. It's less of a tree and more of a tangle.
So she marries Amenhotep IV, who is about to become Akhenaten. They have these 6 daughters, Meritaten, Meketaten, Ankhesenaten.
Neferneferuaten, Tashrit, Neferneferor, and Setipen.
You nailed the pronunciations.
It takes practice.
But what strikes me about the art from this period is the domesticity. You look at the steles and the tomb paintings, and you see the king and queen kissing. You see them bouncing the kids on their knees.
You even see them crying when their daughter Meketaten dies. It's incredibly modern and intimate.
It feels that way, yeah. But you're saying we have to be careful not to mistake intimacy for weakness or just being nice. This art was propaganda.
It was.
How so?
By showing the royal family as this tight, loving unit, they were actually making a powerful theological statement. They were replacing the traditional gods.
Okay, this brings us to the religious revolution, the Aten.
Right. To understand Nefertiti's power, you have to understand what she and her husband did to the state religion. For centuries, the priesthood of Amun had been gathering power.
Incredible bow.
They owned land, they owned mines, they controlled the bureaucracy. They were, for all intents and purposes, a shadow government.
So when Akhenaten and Nefertiti pivot to the Aten, the sun disk, it's not just a spiritual awakening, it's a corporate restructuring.
It's a hostile takeover. That's the best way to think about it. Imagine a CEO deciding that all the middle management, the thousands of priests and minor gods, are fired.
Gone.
The CEO, the Atenin, is now the only source of power. But the Aten is abstract. It's just the sun in the sky. It doesn't talk.
So you need an intermediary, a go-between.
Exactly. And that is where the royal couple comes in. In the old system, you had a triad of gods like Osiris, Isis, and Horus. In Amarna, the new triad became the Aten, Akhenaten, and Nefertiti.
So they became the gods on Earth.
They did. You didn't pray to the Aten directly. You prayed to Nefertiti and Akhenaten, and they forwarded the message.
Which explains why she changed her name in year 5. She didn't just stay Nefertiti, she added a prefix.
Yes, she became Neferneferuaten Nefertiti. Beautiful is the beauty of Aten.
Nah.
She literally branded herself with the god's name. It was a statement of intent.
And when you look at the archaeology, specifically the Talatat blocks, the scale of her presence is just mind-blowing. Can you explain what the Talatat blocks are for the listeners?
Sure. So Akhenaten was building these massive new temples at a breakneck speed. To do that, they used smaller, standardized stone blocks talitat that were easier for one person to carry and stack.
It was like building with Legos instead of massive monoliths.
A perfect analogy. Tens of thousands of these blocks have been found, reused in later monuments by kings who wanted to erase the Amarna period.
And when scholars started piecing these Legos back together to see what was originally painted on them, what did they find?
They found Nefertiti everywhere. In the early years at Karnak, in a structure called the Mansion of the Benben, she completely dominates the scene.
How much is dominates?
In fact, on the preserved blocks from the first 5 years, she appears almost twice as frequently as the king.
Twice as frequently. That is just statistically wild. Usually the queen is the plus one. She stands behind the pharaoh, maybe shaking a rattle, looking supportive.
Precisely. But here, she is the main event. And it's not just the frequency, it's the action.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. We have scenes of her doing things that traditionally only the pharaoh could do.
Specifically, the smiting of the enemy motif. You know the image? The pharaoh holds a group of captive enemies by the hair with one hand and raises a mace to smash their skulls with the other.
It's the ultimate symbol of the king establishing order over chaos. It's a masculine, violent executive role.
And yet, we have Nefertiti depicted in this exact pose.
Right.
We see her on the prow of the royal barge, smiting foreign enemies. We see captive enemies decorating her throne.
And she's also shown worshiping. Right?
Yes, worshiping the Aten in the high priest manner, offering incense directly to the god without the king present. This was unheard of for a queen.
So she is smiting enemies. Doesn't that technically make her a king in terms of religious function?
That is exactly the argument. By taking on the role of the smiter, she is signaling that she possesses the divine authority to maintain cosmic order. She isn't just a consort, she is a co-regent. She is the female aspect of kingship itself.
So she is at the absolute pinnacle of power. She has her own temple, she's smashing heads, she's the face of the new religion. And then, the history books say she vanished.
For a very long time, that was the story. Around year 12 of Akhenaten's reign, Nefertiti just seemed to drop off the map. She stopped appearing in certain reliefs.
And historians, being historians, came up with all the dramatic reasons why.
Oh, the theories were rampant.
Yeah.
She died of the plague that swept through the Near East. She fell out of favor. There was a very, very popular theory that she was replaced by a secondary wife named Kia and was banished to a separate palace in disgrace.
The disgrace theory was huge. I remember reading that in old textbooks. They said her name was erased from monuments.
But archaeology is a self-correcting process, and later analysis showed that the erasures were actually removing Kia's name, not Nefertiti's. So the disgrace theory collapsed. But the silence in the record was still there, for a while, until 2012.
This is one of my favorite moments in the research. One rock in a dusty quarry completely rewrites the timeline. Tell us about the Dada Bado Ennis discovery.
It's a great example of how much is still out there waiting to be found. A mission led by Athena van der Peer was surveying a limestone quarry north of Amarna, a place called Quarry 320 at Derba Balanis.
This is where the workers would have been cutting stone for the temples, right? So it's like their work site.
Exactly. And the workers would often doodle or leave notes in red ochre on the walls, sort of ancient graffiti.
Right.
High up on a wall, they found a 5-line inscription. It was just a simple administrative note, nothing poetic, but it had a date.
Year 16, month 3 of Akhet, day 15.
Year 16. Now remember, Akhenaten died in year 17, so this is right at the very, very end of the regime.
And who does the inscription mention?
It mentions Akhenaten, and right beside him, the great royal wife, his beloved, mistress of the two lands, Neferneferuaten Nefertiti.
Mistress of the two lands.
That is a title of immense power. And it proves definitively that she was alive, she was still the great royal wife, and she was at the king's side just months before his death.
So she didn't vanish in year 12. She didn't die. She didn't get divorced. She was there until the bitter end.
Which forces us to ask a much more interesting question. What happened when Akhenaten died a few months later?
And this leads us to the biggest twist in the deep dive, the theory of the female pharaoh.
This is where the detective work gets really intense. We know Akhenaten dies in year 17. We know his successor, eventually, is the boy Tutankhamun, who becomes Tutankhamun.
But Tut is a child, maybe 8 or 9 years old. He's too young to rule.
Far too young. And there's a gap in the timeline.
A power vacuum.
Exactly. Between Akhenaten and Tutankhamun, we have evidence of a ruler named Neferneferuaten.
Wait, Neferneferuaten is the name Nefertiti took back in year 5?
It is. For a long time, scholars debated this. Was it a man? Was it a mysterious figure named Smeker? But the consensus has shifted dramatically in the last decade.
Towards Nefertiti.
Yes. Leading Egyptologists like Aidan Dodson, Carter Cooney, Nicholas Reeves, they all argue that this ruler was Nefertiti herself.
So the theory is, the king dies, the heir is a child, the empire is crumbling because the new religion is unpopular and the economy is shaky. So mom steps up.
She steps up not just as a regent, but as king. She adopts the full pharaonic titles, and we have a crucial piece of evidence in the epithets used by this female ruler. She calls herself effective for her husband.
Effective for her husband? That sounds oddly specific. It's not in memory of her husband or loving her husband.
It's a very active phrase. It mirrors the way Akhenaten described himself as being effective for the Aten. It positions her as the legitimate successor carrying on his legacy, his work.
But if she was the pharaoh, she wasn't just continuing the revolution blindly, was she? Because by the time Tut takes the throne, the move back to the old religion has already started.
That is the fascinating nuance here. We tend to think of her as a fanatic because of the early years. But if she was the ruler Neferneferuaten, the archaeology suggests she was actually quite pragmatic.
She was doing damage control.
That's the theory. There are signs that during this brief sole reign, maybe 2 or 3 years, she began reconciling with the Amun priesthood. She started the process of moving the court back to Thebes or Memphis.
So she realized the Amarna experiment was failing.
She realized it was unsustainable, and she tried to pivot to save the dynasty for her stepson.
That completely changes her character arc. She goes from the heretic queen to the savvy politician trying to keep the ship from sinking.
She was the bridge. She took the heat, began the restoration, and tried to hand over a stabilized throne to Tutankhamun.
But there were sharks in the water, and this brings us to the moment that I think is the most cinematic in the whole timeline. The Hittite letter.
This is the smoking gun for just how much chaos there was after the death of the king.
Set the scene for us. Where does this letter come from?
We have to look at the Hittite archives, which were found in their capital Hattusa in modern Turkey. The Hittites were the arch-enemies of Egypt at this time. Their king, Sepelulium I, was besieging Egyptian vassal states in Syria, and he was winning.
And suddenly, a messenger arrives from Egypt with a letter.
And the message is absolutely shocking. It is a letter from the Egyptian queen, whom the Hittites call Dakamunzu.
Which isn't a name.
No, it's just a phonetic translation of the Egyptian title, Kahemet Nisu, the king's wife.
And what does she say?
I have the translation right here. She writes, "My husband has died, and I have no son."
Simple enough. Clear.
But then she drops the bombshell. "They say about you that you have many sons. You might give me one of your sons to become my husband."
Whoa, it's basically treason.
It is unprecedented. Egyptian royal women never married foreigners. They viewed foreigners as chaotic and inferior. For the Queen of Egypt to ask an enemy king for a prince to put on the throne of Egypt, it just reeks of desperation.
And she admits it. She writes, "I would not wish to take one of my subjects as a husband. I am afraid."
I am afraid. That phrase is the key to the whole mystery. What is she afraid of?
So who wrote it? For a long time, people thought it was Ankhesenamun, Tut's widow.
That was the standard theory. But the timeline is a bit messy there. Ankhesenamun was young, and while she had no son, she faced a different political landscape. But Nefertiti, if she is ruling as a female pharaoh after Akhenaten's death, she is in an incredibly precarious position.
She has no son. She has powerful generals breathing down her neck.
Exactly. When she says, "I would not wish to take one of my subjects as a husband," most historians think she's talking about Ai or Horemheb,
The old guard.
the deep state. They likely wanted to marry her to legitimize their own claim to the throne.
So she is trying to outmaneuver them. She brings in a Hittite prince, marries him, and suddenly she has a husband who outranks her generals but owes his position entirely to her.
It's a brilliant, desperate gambit. Nicholas Reeves is a big proponent of this theory. It fits the psychology of a ruler trying to hold on to independent power against an imminent coup.
But it failed.
Spectacularly. Sepelulium was suspicious at first. He literally said, "Nothing like this has happened to me in my whole life." But eventually, he sent his son, Prince Zananza. Zananza never made it to Thebes. He was intercepted and killed en route.
Murdered.
Almost certainly.
Yeah.
And you have to ask, who benefits?
The Egyptian generals, Ai and Horemheb, who didn't want a foreigner on the throne.
It seems very likely.
So the alliance dies, the prince dies, and presumably shortly after, Nefertiti, or the female pharaoh, disappears for good.
Yes. The record goes silent again. Tutankhamun takes the throne, Ai becomes his advisor and eventual successor, and Nefertiti vanishes into the sands of history.
Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. the body. We have the mummies of almost all the great New Kingdom pharaohs. We have Ramesses, we have Seti, we have Thutmose. Where is Nefertiti?
That is the holy grail of modern Egyptology,
Cool.
the billion-dollar question.
We know where she was supposed to be buried, right?
She had a suite of rooms prepared in the royal tomb at Amarna. There's even another unfinished tomb, number 29, that might have been for her. But because the court abandoned Amarna and moved back to Thebes, she was never buried there.
So her body, if it was preserved, would have been moved to the Valley of the Kings.
Correct.
There have been so many false alarms over the years. In 1898, Victor Lerev found tomb KV35, and inside he found two women lying next to each other, now known as the elder lady and the younger lady.
And in the early 2000s, the Egyptologist Joanne Fletcher made global headlines claiming that the younger lady was Nefertiti. It was a huge documentary, very persuasive.
I remember the wig theory. That was a big part of it.
Yes, a Nubian-style wig was found nearby that seemed to match Nefertiti's style from her portraits. But science moves forward. In 2010, Dr. Zahi Hawass and his team conducted massive DNA sequencing on these royal mummies.
And the results ruled her out.
Definitively. The DNA showed that the younger lady was the biological mother of Tutankhamun, and crucially, she was the full sister of Akhenaten. Both were children of Amenhotep III and Queen Tai.
And since we know Nefertiti wasn't Akhenaten's sister,
She cannot be the younger lady. The younger lady is likely minor wife or sister wife, whose name we aren't sure of, maybe Nebeta or Akhenaten, but it's not Nefertiti.
okay, so strike one. What about KV21?
This is a tomb containing two female mummies, KV21A and KV21B. KV21B is interesting. She is headless, unfortunately, but her posture is key. Her left arm is bent over her chest, as if holding a fly whisk or scepter,
A royal pose.
a pose reserved for queens.
And who was she buried with?
KV21A. The DNA suggests KV21A might be the mother of the two fetuses found in Tutankhamun's tomb. That would make KV21A Akhenaten Nefertiti's daughter.
So we have a potential daughter buried with an older royal woman.
It mirrors the KV35 burial, where Queen Tai was found buried with her daughter, the younger lady. So it is very possible that KV21B is Nefertiti. But the DNA was too degraded to give a 100% match. It's suggestive, but not conclusive.
We just don't know for sure.
Yeah.
And we have to mention the theory that broke the internet in 2015, the hidden chamber.
Nicholas Reeves again. He looked at the high-resolution scans of the walls of Tutankhamun's burial chamber and noticed what looked like ghosts of doorways beneath the plaster and paint.
The theory being that Tut died so suddenly, they just buried him in the antechamber of a much larger, grander tomb, Nefertiti's tomb.
That's a beautiful theory. It explained why Tut's tomb is so small and cramped for a pharaoh. The world held its breath. They brought in ground-penetrating radar. The first scans were promising. They seemed to show voids. But the second and third rounds? Negative. No voids, no hidden rooms, just solid bedrock.
That is heartbreaking.
It is. It means she is still out there. Maybe in a royal cache we haven't found yet. Maybe she's one of the dozens of unidentified mummies sitting on a shelf in the Cairo Museum basement, just labeled Unknown Woman D.
It is crazy to think that the woman who ruled the world, who reshaped an entire empire, is just lost.
But in a way, she isn't lost at all.
Because we have the bust.
We have the bust. But hopefully after this deep dive, when you look at that bust, you don't just see a pretty face.
No, I see the woman who walked into the temple of Karnak and told the most powerful priesthood in the world, "You're fired."
You see the mother who lost at least one, maybe 3 daughters to plague, and still held the throne together.
You see the mistress of the two lands in year 16, defying the odds while the empire collapsed around her.
And you see the desperate ruler writing to her enemy, I'm afraid, trying to save her dynasty from the men who wanted to take it from her.
It really changes the experience. She wasn't a model, she was a player. Maybe the biggest player of the entire 18th dynasty.
Absolutely. She reigned during the wealthiest, most artistic, and most dangerous moment in ancient Egyptian history. Her legacy is the revolution itself.
And she is still with us. She's in movies, she's in books, she's in video games. We are still obsessed with her.
Because she represents a paradox. The perfect, static, serene beauty on the outside, and the ruthless, dynamic, tragic reality on the inside.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on. We spend millions of dollars trying to find her mummy. We want the physical proof. But ask yourself, if we found her, if we found a dried, wrapped body in a glass case, would it actually add to her legend? Or has the idea of Nefertiti, that immortal face in Berlin, become more powerful than the human being ever was?
That's the power of art. It eclipses history.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll catch you on the next one.